Has someone finally found a way to save air travel, not only in the United States, but around the world? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. I'm with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, my colleagues. Gentlemen, there's something that they're calling Travel Pass that is essentially an app on your iPhone or Android phone that, through some HIPAA-secured ways, manages to hold a certificate that demonstrates that you have tested negative for the COVID-19 virus. And the experiments that are being done right now are testing whether that could be used in order to restore people's confidence and faith enough in flying again, that if everybody had one of these passes, they get on the airplane and theoretically almost everybody is healthy, and you don't have to worry about getting sick on the airplane. Bill Whittle, it strikes me that if such a technology could be successful, I mean, there are all kinds of problems that you could bring up about it, like how recently did you test negative? You know, on your way home from the doctor's office, could you have contracted the ailment? And whether this is voluntary or mandatory. But Bill, I guess on a personal level, you're a guy who loves to fly your own plane. Would you be willing, in order to get back in the air and do some more traveling to perhaps do some public speaking, would you be willing to carry this app on your phone to demonstrate that you're clean and safe?
Well, I am clean and safe. Number two, I fly my own airplane and I drive my own car. That doesn't mean I'm willing to get on board ones with trains or buses or any other rest of the stuff, although the whole thing is completely overblown. So let's just start again and let's just take this from the beginning, okay? In a rational society, in a sane society, and in a society with a free press and all of the things that I used to believe in, you could make the case for this being a temporary procedure to help prevent the spread of a pandemic. But none of those statements are true anymore. None of them. And they haven't been for a long time. I think probably the best example is this. You may remember Al-Qaeda from your history books, or ISIS, both of which have been utterly destroyed, one by George Bush and one by Donald Trump. Have you ever seen the TSA threat level go to green? Ever? Have you ever seen it green since it was instituted in the days after 9/11? Never. And you never will. It will never be green, ever. Because if it's green, then all of these pre-flight screenings and all the things that we managed to do without before 9/11 start to question some of these things. It will never go away, ever. It will never, ever be green. And because of that, I have a different opinion about this than I would if I lived in a rational, sane, and well-regulated society. I suspect that if this thing happens, then it's going to come and it's never going to go away. It's going to be like the threat levels. You're going to need your phone to verify any number of things. And by the way, if your argument is that you need to have a medical verification that you don't have COVID-19 in order to fly on an airplane, how's that any different than not having a medical certification to prove that you don't have the flu or any other contagious disease like leprosy or something like that, which is not terribly contagious? Measles is, however, exceedingly contagious, much more contagious than COVID-19. How do I know that I'm getting on an airplane with somebody who may not have the measles if I don't have their phone telling me that they've been completely up to date on all of the rest of their things? And if it can track diseases, then it can also track things like political opinions and who you voted for and all the rest of this stuff. So this idea that I need to be certified to fly by some unhackable piece of electronics that is broadcasting in the clear at any given moment of the day, my location, my number of footsteps I take. No, I'm sorry. Like I said, you could make a case for it in a rational age with a free press. But today, I think the risk of it is just far, especially given the actual lethality of COVID-19. I think the risk of this is immeasurably higher, and only because we all know, everybody knows that this would not be a temporary thing. There would never come a day, Scott, ever will there come a day, if this is instituted, when the airlines will say, hey, we don't need this anymore. That will never happen, ever.
Stephen Green, Bill just made me think of something interesting. In ages past, if you had a disease that was communicable, chances are that disease wasn't going to go very far, especially since most people lived in rural communities. And, it may infest your local village, but there was very little travel outside of that village. But because of the ability to conduct high-speed travel largely by air, we can rapidly spread diseases around the world. One of the things that's being talked about with this travel pass is not just having a record of your testing, but also having a record of your vaccination. You could, when the vaccine is available, of course, or vaccines are available, you could make the argument, Steve, that this is kind of a common good, the public health, within the sphere of communicable diseases, and that people have a right to know when they're getting on an airplane that they're not getting on alongside of somebody who hasn't had the vaccine or who has had a positive test for the disease. Isn't it fair, at least from the airline's perspective, to say, yeah, before we let you on here, we want to make sure that that's not the case?
Do you have a right to get on a plane that's not going to crash?
I think so, but that's just for me.
No, you don't. Planes crash. Not very often, fortunately, but there's no right to that. It's a natural disaster. They happen, unfortunately. And we're in the middle of one right now with this Wuhan flu pandemic. Thing to remember, well, there are two things to remember, and I'll get to the technical one second. The first thing to remember is, a lot of times when we think of deadly infectious diseases, we think of Ebola. It's awful. You bleed out the eyes, you bleed out your pores. It's a hemorrhagic fever. You hemorrhage to death, and it's just awful. That said, Ebola is not a very successful virus. It kills very quickly and very horribly in ways that immobilize people. And so it can't spread it very well. It burns itself out before it can go global in the way that COVID has. COVID, on the other hand, is a highly successful virus. It isn't very deadly, and it's highly communicable. And so it's going to be around for a very long time. But what that means is we're going to get some herd immunity going. We're going to get vaccines going. These are all good things, none of which require us to surrender our privacy to the digital gods. Let me give you an example. You ever used or seen people use Apple Pay, where they just tap their phone or their watch on the card reader, and then that's it, they're done? 2 seconds, and they're done. It's kind of amazing how that works. You have to authenticate your phone first, whether it does that with your thumbprint or your face, and this is why you don't need a PIN number. And the wallet app, and I assume Samsung Pay and Google Pay work in a similar manner. This isn't a plug for Apple. I just use the example because I've got an iPhone. It generates a fake credit card number, a unique fake credit card number for every single transaction. So if somebody were skimming, with an NFC reader, we're trying to skim credit card numbers off of your Apple Pay or your Google Pay, all they would get is a one-time fake credit card number. But through various back channel means, the bank knows it's real and the store knows it's real, and so the money goes through. You never have to transmit your credit card number. You never have to punch in a PIN number. So something like Apple Pay or Samsung Pay or whatever is more secure than an actual credit card, believe it or not. That said, it's only more secure than a credit card. There's no such thing as total security. Everything gets hacked. I just saw a story yesterday that I posted on Instapundit that people with the right Bluetooth tools can hijack a Tesla in 90 seconds. Everything gets hacked. And so when I hear about me having to put my entire life on a phone, which most of us do sort of automatically, our contacts are in there, our social media is in there, pretty much we trust everything in our phone. But the idea that I now have to open that up just to get on a plane, when we say something as a joke from Nazi Germany, do you have your papers? We always use that absurd German accent. I don't want to hear that in American English, not when I'm trying to go anywhere.
Just a quick update for what Steve said. When he said that anything can be hacked, you obviously meant anything can be hacked except for electronic voting machines, which are inviolate and incorruptible.
You have your own episodes this week, Bill. Please don't bleed over into mine.
I've got the truth Ebola, man. I'm bleeding out the eyes, truth and all the rest of that stuff.
You have a hemorrhagic wit. So here's the situation. We go to a restaurant the other night, my wife and I. She happened to be in the area when I was getting off work, and she said, "Would you like to meet me?" And I said, sure. And so we pull in next to each other at this restaurant. We put our masks on. We walk into the restaurant, and the waitress is about to take us to our table. And she goes, "Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to get your temperature." And she pulls out this little gun and shoots it at our foreheads and then says, "Okay, come with me." And I said, "Well, what was my temperature?" And she tells me what the temperature was, but it was funny that's the first time that has happened to me, where somebody in a public place that was not a doctor took my temperature. And I was just glad it wasn't one of those other kinds of thermometers. But anyway, she did that so naturally, and I received it so naturally, that only after the fact did I think, well, that was really weird. I just had a teenage girl take my temperature in a public place without me planning to have that done. And it says a couple of things to me. Number one is that we have this kind of proclivity to normalcy that we'll do almost anything to maintain the normal course of our lives. So in order to go to a restaurant, if part of the protocol is now that I have to wear a mask and somebody has to shoot me in the head with a laser beam, well, I'm okay with that. It didn't hurt. And then I had a delicious meal.
I'm okay with that too.
And so, I'm willing to accept that almost without thinking. I'm willing to accept going to work, although I hate it, having to wear a mask 7 or 8 hours a day, because that's the price of me in being able to earn an income. And the only way that we can run this operation with relative degree of safety is that the customers and the employees do that same thing. At some point, this highly adaptable species, constantly figure out ways to get things done despite whatever challenges face us. So most of the coverage about this, especially from guys like me who are on the right or conservative or libertarian, has been very negative. I just wanted to drop that little idea that at least to a small extent, without worrying about the HIPAA issues and the privacy issues and the civil liberties and all that kind of stuff, it just strikes me as pretty amazing that we have been able to find a way not only around the difficulties presented by the disease, but the difficulties presented by the government's reaction to the disease. And somehow we go to the grocery store and we go to restaurants and many of us go to work, and we've somehow figured out a way to continue to function. I think back sometimes and I wonder, how did my grandfather get through the Great Depression? How did he get through World War II? And I interviewed him once. I just set up a camera on a tripod and let his great-grandchildren ask him questions. And over he kept saying the same thing. When they asked him, well, how did he deal with these peculiar, huge challenges that he faced? And my grandfather's response was, it was just the normal of the day. You're looking back on it now and it seems freakish, but it was just that's what we had to do during the Great Depression. That was how normal at that time. It seems weird now, but we just lived that way because we had to, and we survived, and we got through it. And my contention with all of this, despite my concerns about privacy violations and the way that it's changed our day-to-day lives, and whether the government's getting too much power over our lives, and whether we can actually ever lick this disease, my belief is that this is just the normal of this day, but it's not the normal of every day. And we will get through it, and people innovate, and they adapt, and they strive, and eventually thrive. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.